I'm Chris Boyle. Welcome to the Boiling Point. Okay, so here are the top stories that I have to break down for you guys this week. So first off, and this was actually really special to me, I got to go visit the Veterans Administration. I guess you call it a campus facility up in West Los Angeles, and this is super impressive. So I had never been there before. I actually didn't really know what I was walking into. I went there with a friend of mine, a guy by the name of Michael Speakman, who runs a 13 Stripes winery, make fantastic wine, really, really great wine. And it's not just great because it tastes great, which it does, don't get me wrong, but they're also great because they support a really great cause. And that is veterans who served this country, people who gave their time, potentially their lives, to make this country safe for people like you and I to enjoy our freedom to have a sip of wine every now and then, right? So we were there in support of a organization called Tunnels to Tower. That's where this very, very fancy little badge comes in. Now, Tunnels to Tower Foundation, and I'm just going to read off the Wikipedia article so I don't get anything wrong, because I'll admit, I want to get the facts perfect for you guys. So Wikipedia though, but let's read from them. Tunnels to Towers Foundation is a charitable organization founded in tribute to New York Fire Department firefighter Stephen Siller, who was killed on September 11th, 2001 during the September 11th attacks. And it's actually named Tunnels to Tower because of the route that he took through the tunnels underneath New York City to get to those towers, to ultimately sacrifice his life for his fellow citizens, his fellow Americans. So it's an amazing cause in honor of an amazing man, quite frankly. And they've done, not to overuse the term and sound corny, but amazing things. One of the things that they're most associated for is paying off the mortgages of people whose family members have died in service, right? So you have someone similar, kind of like to Knights of Columbus. That's how like the Knights of Columbus organization that I'm also affiliated with it got into it. They started by providing services for people whose family members had died. And, often it's men who died in service, in the case of Tunnels to Tower, service of their country. And in today's housing market, it's extremely hard for people to nail down a house, right? And you and I, I'm sure, know that. So Tunnels to Tower has paid off the mortgages of a number of families. I think I want to say upwards of 50 different families already they paid off the mortgages for, which is really, really amazing. And they continue to do this really good work. And I think this might be, quite frankly, their largest project to date. If not, I would be amazed, right? And I'd learned a little bit about this through my friend Michael Speakman, and he had told me how amazing this project was. And it's really set to deliver not just housing, right? Because that's something that's easy to misconstrue, but what's called wraparound services for veterans who are experiencing homelessness. And I have to say, the veteran population is an extremely resilient one and largely a very, very successful one. But the truth is that many of us fall on hard times. And, that's just a reality of the world that we live in. And when you look at the veteran population in particular, these are people who often have dedicated a large amount of their career and their lives and their safety and their, potentially their mental health and sacrifice to this country. So it's only right that we give something in return to them. So I was really happy to hear that this organization was investing in, again, not just housing, but what we call wraparound services and continuum of care services. So just a little bit of background on myself. I worked in county government in Orange County, and I worked under two different members of the Board of Supervisors directly on the Board of Supervisors, meaning I was a staff member while they were on the board. And I also worked for a third member of the Board of Supervisors on his campaign staff for a different position. So I'm very familiar with county politics, and it's largely counties that deal with the issue of homelessness. And in Orange County, Orange County, California, that was a big issue, a big issue for a number of years, and it still is, quite frankly. So I have a very, very direct knowledge of what goes into care for the homeless population, to the point where I actually did an overnight stay at a homeless shelter with one of the members of the Board of Supervisors as a member of his staff. So I've, literally walked the continuum of care through step by step in the place of someone who would be going through it. So I understand what this means. And, I know how important this can be, but I also know the pitfalls and the follies and, the potentials for what I would call, quite frankly, the stagnation of people who are going through the system to the benefit of often nonprofits and other organizations that are, running these care operations. So, there was a lot for me to be worried about when I was looking at this on the ground operation, but there's a lot that I honestly thought was really good. And number one, that's that it was a nice place. It was a really, really nice place. The grounds were like huge, expansive, absolutely massive, and they had nice views. It was in a nice location. It's the kind of place that you would want to live, and they're building housing that you would want to live in, which granted, you could say, oh, maybe it's going to get wrecked up. Maybe these homeless people are going to go in and absolutely destroy the place, despite the fact that they're veterans, right? Ignoring that, because even, veterans, like every one of us is fallible. Every one of us could make mistakes. Every one of us could end up some like, crackhead who's liable to wreck up any room that we're put into, right? So let's be realistic. Let's live in the real world and not be these bleeding hearts and say, oh, maybe that's an issue. Well, sorry, it's been a really hot day out here. Santa Ana winds. So to my understanding, they do have an intake process for folks, and this is a place that's only reserved for people who are able to go in there and able to actually acclimate to the living conditions, which are very, very nice. And this is a place that allows people to get in touch with job services, but also potentially, quite honestly, just be there. And that's something that we, quite frankly, need in this society, right? There's, when you look at our population on the street, and when you look at the population that is living in a severe need of care, we need to be strong-handed with a lot of these people and say, hey, so a little bit of background. When I was working in Orange County, one of the big issues was there were major homeless encampments on the streets, and these were stretching through the riverbeds, through the Santa Ana River, and they were a real source of problems. I mean, literally the river was contaminated. They were saying every time it rained, like, don't go swimming because you're going to be swimming in like feces and hypodermic needles or whatever. And you can't be doing that. And they had these absolutely insane, like labyrinthine caverns of stolen bicycles that they had built up in underpasses underneath, like literally in the riverbed. It was insane. It was insanity. And the county came in and tried to say, hey, we want to clear these people out. They sent in the sheriff's department, and a local judge, Judge David O. Carter, he said, and this guy, search his name, he comes up all the time, but he's a federal judge, and he said, no, you can't clear these people out. They are, they're living there and they need to go somewhere, whatever. So basically he said that you can't clear them out unless you have a like the same number of beds, right? You need an approximate number of beds available in homeless shelters. So basically, if there's 1 million homeless people, obviously if there's 100 homeless people in your county, you need 100 beds before you clear them out, or else you're basically telling them leave with nowhere else to go. And that's a violation of their civil rights to exist. They need to exist somewhere. That's the logic. Like, you say to someone, okay, leave, well, where do you go? A person needs to exist somewhere. So the county, actually, Judge Carter said if you want them to go, they need to go somewhere. So he told the county, you need to find an approximate number of beds. So this meant that the county had to do what's called a point in time count. And that meant they had to employ a bunch of people, some of them volunteers, most of them nonprofits that were paid out through county money, through taxpayer dollars, to go and run around the county and essentially all in one night drive around in vans and like literally like with a clicker go down every alleyway, around every little, trash bin fire with guys warming their hands in little cutout gloves and count them all up and see how many bums are in the county. And only once they had done that, they were able to, go in and say, hey, you can't live in these, squalorous, strange shanty towns along the riverbed and, semi-underground, ridden with disease and drugs and stolen goods and everything. And here's the reality. Like, as unfortunate as it is, I kind of agree with Judge Carter. I just don't think we're taking it far enough, right? Because if you want to be honest, it's not humane to let these people just live in squalor. It's like, and when I say squalor, I don't just mean like, oh, like they're poor, like, oh, it's a poorer person. Like that's tough. When people are poor, when they're impoverished, but they're like sane and capable, excuse me, they should it's the fizzies and the Pellegrino. When someone's impoverished, granted they, we should provide the best job environment possible so people can achieve prosperity, right? That's different than impoverishment. When I talk about squalor, what I mean is like somebody that maybe this isn't the right use of the word, but what I'm talking about here is people that that are living on the street without the mental faculties to take care of themselves, and they're living like literally in their own waste. They're like shooting drugs into their arm and smoking drugs into their arm, and not the fun drugs, maybe fun to the point where they like rot your face off or whatever and leave you slumped over, and and are living in their own like filth and decay. And it's not, number one, it's not safe. Like, it's not safe for people around them, and it's not safe for themselves, right? These are people who often hurt people around them. They steal, and they contribute to a lot of violence, like upper level violence. The people who are selling them those drugs are extremely violent. And those are like gang members and bad people doing even worse things and responsible for even more violence. But then going a step beyond that, this is violence to them. Like allowing them to sit there on the street, like mentally ill, shooting drugs. Like that's not cool, dude. Like that's not liberty. Like that's not. I think, again, I'm ripping off Michael Knowles a little here, where he said, "Oh, if liberty is shooting drugs on your arm on the street, that's not liberty." It's not liberty. Like, it's not cool. It's not right. It's not moral. It's not just. For these people's own sake, some people need to be put into, some sort of forcible housing. And if we want to pave the way with this Veterans Administration thing, where it's taking vets and putting them in this very, very voluntary situation where they have, wraparound support, and it paves the model for when we, I'm getting very controversial here, but when we actually do say, hey, we need to reopen the mental hospitals, which we do, right? In this country and in places around the world, we had hospitals for the nutsos, charitably speaking. And, we still have those in some extreme cases, but clearly there's way more crazy people on the street than there are crazy hospitals to contain them. And I think we should deal with this in a very, very charitable way. I'm not some Nazi authoritarian where I think we should round people up and put them in ditches and shoot them in the back of the noggin. That's evil. That's evil. We should round people up, but we should put them in places where they can be cared for properly. And I think that not doing that, leaving them on the street to wallow in filth, is an evil, wicked thing. And that's not most people who are even homeless. Some of them are just like indigent, like they're just, angry people, and some of them, there's a spectrum of care, and there's a spectrum of force. Wow, maybe I shouldn't post this. I'm gonna get in trouble for this one. But that's my thoughts on homelessness, quite frankly. And anyone who's reasonable and rational and who's dealt with a homeless person in their past, who I have, I have, and just personally, I have, in a lot of different levels, then they'll know that I'm speaking from truth here. But let's move on to some other stories. What else do we have to deal with this week? Well, JD Vance visited my home area here, right on the border between San Diego and Orange County. Beautiful spot. So that's home to the San Onofre nuclear power plant just to the north, the nuclear titties, as me and my family call them, me and my cousins call them since I was a kid. And actually, my grandpa, Joseph Thomas Boyle, who worked for Bechtel Engineering at the time, had a hand in the design of those titties. It's one of the things that brought him all the way from Brooklyn here to the West Coast. They said, Mr. Boyle, we have a project for you, and it's more than a handful. So he came out here and he designed those nuclear breastises that they're now dismantling in the name of feminism or whatever. We actually do need to be designing more nuclear facilities. It's really true. And I need to take my kids on a tour of those before they take them down. But either way, just to the south of there, we have Camp Pendleton. Beautiful, massive, massive military base. And both our Secretary of War Secretary, I'm not sure which to call him, and our Vice President J.D. Vance, so War Secretary Pete Hegseth and Vice President J.D. Vance came down here to beautiful Southern California, paradise incarnate. It's honestly, in my opinion, one of the best places in the world, and I visited just a handful of the best places around the world, and they got the opportunity to visit to see something very cool, which is a bunch of pissed off Southern Californians stuck in traffic. Yeah, I know, we ought to be used to it by now, but they shut down the 5, and there was actually mixed reporting. So originally I had heard that they were going to shut it down and that they were shooting ordinances over the 5, and then I heard, no, that's preposterous. They're not shutting it down. They're not shooting ordinances over the 5, and then suddenly, maybe somebody heard that report and said, what would be dope if we actually did that and shut it down and shot ordinances over the 5. So that's what they did. They shut the freeway down. They shot ordinances over the 5. And, or maybe I'm misreporting some of the details. They did shut down the 5. They did shoot ordinances. I don't know if it was actually over the freeway. If not, it should have been. That would have been pretty cool. And I know that spot pretty well. Actually, I pull off on Las Pulgas Road all the time to pee in the bushes if I'm taking a long journey. No, I don't use there is, I know there's a rest stop like one exit up, but I'm not using a rest stop. What am I, on the DL? No. I pull off on Las Pulgas and pee in the brush, and then I continue on. It's super fast. Zoom. I don't know if I just admitted to a crime. If not, maybe I'll edit this out. I'll have to talk to my lawyer. If it is a crime, then let me just say I meant it in Minecraft. Anyway, this was a fantastic week in news. I think one of my favorite stories was just in time for Halloween. The inevitable death of all of our careers, right? Whether we retire or are taken down in our prime. Okay, so this is an article that, well, holy moly. It's going to take me a long time to unpack this one, folks. And maybe you've seen the unpacking of this in other places, but I bet you very few have actually had people who have worked with and still directly work with people involved in this story. That's me. Oh, ah. Oof. So maybe you've heard some breakdowns of this story already, but I bet you have not heard one from someone who works with or has worked with people directly involved. Yours truly. So let's get into it. So this is just about a week ago, 6 days to the day that I'm recording this. Politico dropped this story, and this is a good one. I'll just read you the headline. I love Hitler. This is a quote. Quote, I love Hitler. Leaked messages expose young Republicans' racist chat. I don't love Hitler. The subtext, or whatever. Thousands of private messages reveal young GOP leaders joking about gas chambers, slavery, and rape. Yes, that's right. And then it has this funny little graphic of all of these text messages compiled together out of context. And they say things like, what? Everyone that votes no is going to the gas chamber, fire emoji. Great, I love Hitler, laughing emoji. Also, we're officially under consideration for a Trump endorsement, smiling face. They have to throw that in as if Trump is endorsing the great I love Hitler, laughing face. And they're all in the same line. And you get the idea from there. So let's get into it. Leaders of young Republican groups throughout the country worried what would happen if their Telegram chat ever got leaked, but they kept typing anyway. I'm sure we've all been on a chat like that before, and that's a common theme here. They referred to black people as monkeys and, quote, the watermelon people, and mused about putting their political opponents in gas chambers. They talked about raping their enemies and driving them to suicide, and then lauded Republicans who they believe support slavery. William Hendricks, the Kansas Young Republicans vice chair, used the words N-GA and N-GUHA, variations of a racial slur, more than a dozen times in the chat. Bobby Walker, the vice chair of the New York State Young Republicans at the time, referred to rape as epic. Peter Guinta, who at the time was chair of the same organization, wrote in a message sent in June that, quote, everyone that votes no is going to the gas chamber. Votes no on what? I don't know. We're left to speculate. What? Let's see. Guinta was referring to an upcoming vote on whether he should become the chair of the Young Republicans National Federation, the GOP's 15,000 member political organization for Republicans who are between 18 and 40 years old. 40? Sub-40s young Republican, I guess. Hey, I wouldn't. I feel like sub-30 should be appropriate. So I want to look at these messages a little more, but saying something in a goofy political chat, everyone who doesn't vote for me gets the gas chamber. Like when you're in, so if you had some goofy like edgelord HOA, I don't know. I'm waiting to get offended here, quite frankly. And this is coming from someone who who's not, I'm not stoked on that kind of rhetoric in the general sense. Let's just say that. I have, plenty of reasons to have issue with that, but I think that having jokes and having, for heaven's sake, some of the funniest movies in the world. What is that one, the Death of Stalin? Like, that's a funny movie that people on the left and the right can enjoy. Like, there's funny movies that deal in funny concepts, funny jokes that are edgy. Like, we can't ever be edgy in a private conversation. Like, we can't ever have fun. We can't ever, like, do anything, especially if we're in politics and we're having political jokes. We can't ever make, like, any sort of any joke. We have to always be on eggshells all the time around each other, and we can't build any sense of camaraderie. We can't build any sense of unity. We can't have any jokes. And granted, this is like, oh, like the gas chamber for my opponent. Like, and this is different than the Jay Jones quotation, and I'll tell you why. You're about to call me a hypocrite, but I actually will tell you why. Because these kids don't actually have the power to do that. They're joking about people within a colloquial context, and they're joking about people that are on their team. And that's something that we want to ignore. People like James Lindsay online who have talked about, and that actually is the main distinction. People like James Lindsay have talked online about how, oh, the friend-enemy distinction was made by these evil Nazis who have these evil goals or whatever. In reality, it's just a basic understanding of the world. And when you joke about your friends in this manner, if I said like, "Oh, I'm gonna like kill my cousin," like honestly, I'm not gonna kill my cousin. I love my cousin. I love I love my people, right? I hate the people that want to kill me. That's basic biological metaphysics. I don't know how else to put it. That's just like reality, right? So when you say like, okay, I want to kill my enemy's children, that bears a lot more weight than saying like, oh, if you vote against me, I'm gonna put you in the gas chamber, bro. Like, okay, well, honestly, if I say that to my buddy, someone who's on my side, he knows the difference. But if I say to my enemy, I'm going to kill your progeny, I'm going to cut off your line because you're raising people that are ideologically opposed to me, those are worlds apart. They're not the same thing. They're not. Like, they're not the same thing. They're obviously not the same thing. And if you can't understand that based on my breaking it down right now, I'm sorry, you're fucking retard. And I don't know if I should bleep that or whatever, but that's just the reality of the situation. So I'm just going to move right on from that story because jokes are jokes and truth is truth. And the Democrats have told their truth a million billion times, and Republicans have told their truth, and that's that we want to protect America, protect Americans, do the right thing, restore law and order and prosperity. And it's not that difficult to understand. What's the next story I got to look at with you guys? Oh, that No Kings riot. Yeah, no Kings. Actually, so I will say there's a lot of people on the right who want to say, oh, there was nothing but geriatric old goofballs who were out there for these ones. And, like, honestly, that was kind of true of the Pussy Hat riots back in, or Pussy Hat riots, Pussy Hat protests, whatever, Women's March back in 15, 16, right around then. Or no, it would have been after that. It was like 2018, 2017. Either way, when they had those stupid marches, it was largely the same thing. It was a bunch of geriatric old hags. But, people, what they really remember is the George Floyd riot. So anything that falls short of that bar, they say, oh, that's nothing. That doesn't exist. It's not real. Even my wife, she was saying like, oh, what does it matter? Well, I gotta piss. Anything that falls short of that bar of the George Floyd 2020 riots is viewed somehow as not as crazy, not as psychotic or whatever. But the reality is that My wife was actually asking me, what is the point of these protests? What does any protest ever accomplish? And I do have to admit, they're more effective when it's your own side protesting, right? If you're a Republican congressman and Republicans are protesting, you're going to pay more attention because the Democrats are never going to vote for you anyway. And that's one of the unfortunate side effects of political polarization, at least in terms of getting things that are bipartisan done often. That said, some of these protests can build momentum, especially among moderates who don't really have their mind made up necessarily. There's a lot of people who, quite honestly, and this is not to their discredit, there's a lot of people who feel because we live in an American culture that's very political, it's their duty to go out and vote. But they have busy lives, right? They work a job, they have kids, they have hobbies. They don't have the opportunity to pay attention to politics full time. So they go out and vote, and sometimes they vote just a little bit based off their gut. So when they see all these protests and they hear, like, oh, all these people are mad at Donald Trump, then they feel like maybe he's doing something wrong and they need to check his power. And he has 2 more years in office, right? After the midterms, right? If you're going to vote in the midterms, he has 2 more years after that. So maybe he needs a check on some of that power in the next 2 years. So you vote for Democrat members of Congress. It does matter. Tiny bouncy ball. You hear that? That's why it matters. Because at the end of the day, while we're paying attention to those things that matter, unfortunately, the political class, the people who are motivated by nothing other than their political identity, they don't have those things. So they sublimate them onto going out to these marches and going out and voting on crazy issues that hurt you and your family out of their spite because they hate hearing that noise. They hate seeing the love of your family and knowing that they can't have that. So I really, really challenge you to pay attention to what's happening around you. We in California here, we're coming up on the Prop 50 vote. If any of you are California voters, vote no on Prop 50. Let's knock this one down so we could really try to hold down the House of Representatives. But it's our fight to keep fighting, and I'm really glad that you guys are joining me in it. Thank you so much for watching.